Today, we become legends.
The mid-season patch blew the meta wide open, with some old picks falling into obscurity and plenty of new faces storming the meta, mostly as a result of item changes, but also direct god changes too. Today we're going to explore the new meta and give my thoughts on the top 3 gods for every role in Conquest to carry your ranked and casual games. If you enjoy these informative meta breakdowns, then be sure to subscribe to the channel. I post guides on all aspects of Smite, from god guides to role guides to item guides to mechanic guides to meta breakdowns like this one, so if any of that interests you, then hit that button below and help us on the road to 100k. But without further ado, let's jump in. So the first role we're looking at today is the one that's changed the most with this new patch, the ADC role. And never has it been more relevant to call it ADC and not Hunter role because of the rise of magical ADCs due to the Ring of Hecate. So my first ADC pick will surprise no one that's played even a few games of this patch, it's Freya. She's the best abuser of Ring of Hecate in the entire game, and the item single-handedly solves her weak early power curve and catapults her into the late game where she does best. Freya is now only weak until she gets 2 items online, boots on Ring of Hecate, where before it would take her at least 3, probably 4 items to start contending with other hunters and ADCs. And it's really that early game power curve being strengthened that makes Freya so strong. It allows her to get to that monstrous late game where she can run through an entire team in 5 seconds very comfortably. I'd say Freya is probably the best ADC right now, however these other 2 picks plus my honorable mention are definitely top contenders as well. So pick number 2 is Olorun, who has become a top pick for very similar reasons to Freya. Ring of Hecate is an insanely strong item even after the nerf it received, and it single-handedly makes magical ADCs come online so much faster than they would have done before the mid-season patch. Olorun was already a passable, if not strong pick before these changes, but with the new items he has rocketed to being one of the best ADCs in the game, along with being a very good mid laner too. I have him in the ADC section because in my opinion he's stronger there than he is in mid, but you can absolutely play this guy mid and dominate too, don't forget that. His ultimate is and always has been completely insane for teamfighting, and his base kit allows him to be very versatile between wave clear and boxing, making him a very good ADC and mid laner. You can't go wrong with Olorun right now, assuming he's not banned of course. Quick honourable mentions to Ula and Jingwei, who in my opinion are both just slightly short of making the top 3. They're both still insanely good and you can't really go wrong with picking them. It just happens that these 3 ADC picks that I have right now are even stronger. And that final pick for the ADC role is a returning face, that being Heimdallr. Despite many nerfs and the meta shifting to favour magical ADCs instead of traditional hunters, Heimdallr still stands as one of the strongest and best gods for the ADC role. Heim pretty much has it all. He's strong at pretty much every stage of the game, he has great burst damage, super safe because of the vision on his crystals and his insane combat teleports, great CC between the horn slow and knock up, and of course that insanely strong ultimate doing 40% of someone's health while setting them up for whatever else your team wants to throw at them when they return from the Muspelheim. I don't think this god needs too much more explanation. He's been a top 3 ADC pretty much since his release, and we're yet to see him nerfed enough to change that. I'm sure you all know why Heimdallr is strong. Alright, moving on, we have another role that has changed quite a lot with the new items, though perhaps not quite as much as ADC. Jungle received plenty of changes through the percent pen options and auto attack items that shifted the meta around a lot, and that's very evident with my first pick for the role being Nemesis. A god that wasn't seen too much before, and though she was definitely underrated, she wasn't a top pick. But with the new items favouring her massively and allowing her to go into crit heavy builds while still having 40% pen is crazy strong. Add her ultimate onto that and tanks mean nothing when you have a Nemesis on your team. A great user of the buffed Golden Blade and the new Serrated Edge, while also being able to flex into a slightly more ability focused build if that's your style, with things like Arondice and Heartseeker, you really can't go wrong with Nemesis in the jungle right now. Speaking of auto attackers and Golden Blade, our good old friend Bakasura has returned to the meta after some direct buffs for some reason, and of course item changes that favour him such as the Golden Blade changes. Keep in mind that this list is mostly for ranked and casuals, not SPL. Bakasura can carry most ranked games by just power farming with Golden Blade. Invade the enemy jungler's camps on cooldown and then take that lead straight to the enemy carries and melt them before they can do anything. He's a very snowbally character, which normally isn't a positive trait, but he snowballs so hard that you can easily close out games or get such a big lead that it doesn't matter anymore and just blow out the enemy team. Quick honourable mention to Pele, who in my opinion is sitting just outside the top 3 right now and is definitely a jungler worth trying. But my final pick is a returning face that doesn't exactly benefit from the new item changes or meta swings, he's just a good default pick for the jungle, that being Thor. Thor just has everything you need from a jungler, nothing more, nothing less. Good farming, great ganks with the global ultimate, Solid team fighting, great CC, decent on sieges, and the ability-based assassin items are still as strong as they ever were. Just because new items were added that favour other gods doesn't mean old items got any worse. Heartseeker is still busted, and the mace tree as always is going to be really good for flat pen. If you want a reliable pick that will work very similarly every game and that you have a lot of flexibility with, I'd definitely give Thor a go in the jungle. And quickly at the end here, I'll just mention that Thor is also a passable solo laner. Not top tier, but definitely pretty strong over there. Way better in jungle though, which is why he's here and not in the solo lane section. Speaking of though, that's a good segue into the solo laners for this video. The solo lane meta was shifted around quite a bit due to the removal of the tier 2 shields, addition of new items to the pool like Sledge, as well as some buffs and nerfs to popular items and gods. The first solo laner is one that a lot of us expected to be good after the patch, that being Amaterasu. She was already a strong contender in solo before mid-season, hanging just outside the top 3 most of the time, but with the removal of the tier 2 shields and the subsequent slower solo lane meta that brings, Amaterasu is thriving right now, as she loses very few matchups in terms of the other top solo laners right now, while also having one of the best late game team fighting and objective presences of any solo laner, meaning she has very few weaknesses right now. While she did use the old Berserker shield, it was more out of necessity to keep up with the other shield abusers than it was because she needed the shield itself to function. So she's very happy to see those items gone and even makes good use of the new Berserker shield plus Sledge of course. That makes Amaterasu a force to be reckoned with both in the laning phase and in teamfights. Solo laner number 2 is an obvious one. Cthulhu is a recent release and you know what that means. Yep, he's broken. First up, I'll mention that like with Olorun and some other picks on this list, Cthulhu plays 2 roles very well and I'm listing him in his best role to avoid repeating myself, but he can definitely play support to a top level as well as solo, so keep that in mind. However, from solo, Cthulhu brings a backline diving presence that pretty much every carry fears. That ultimate allows him to go deeper than most other solo laners can into the enemy backline to harass, CC, and maybe kill the enemy mid and ADC, while creating space for your own team to follow up or get objectives. Cthulhu doesn't slack in the laning phase either. He's not an outright lane bully most of the time, but due to his safe clear and poke, he doesn't lose a single matchup and often wins them. Not to mention he's incredibly hard to gank and shut down due to his ultimate, so if you can get a lead from solo, it's likely you can keep that lead or even extend it going into the team fighting phase where Cthulhu can do his things to the enemy backline. Super strong solo laner right now, and like I said, he's also a very good support as well. And the final solo laner is Wukong. With the removal of Glad Shield, I have to say I didn't expect too much from Wukong, but I've been proven wrong over the last 2 weeks or so with him seeing a lot of successful play in my games as well as SPL, plus the community is valuing him very highly right now. He can use Soul Eater very well as a replacement for Glad Shield if you want a more aggressive laning phase, but you can also just go for a standard defense build and be near unkillable as well. If you want a pick that's safe and will always get you through the lane just fine, Wukong is your guy. Between the Ox and the Bird, as well as his ultimate, he's incredibly hard to kill in the laning phase and will almost always be able to slip away from you if he's building defense. And while he's not the most insane teamfighting pick, he can still rotate very effectively with the Bird and can dive backlines aggressively because he can always fall back on his ultimate if he gets low to buy some time. And before we move on, quick honourable mention to Hercules, who is a solid solo laner right now, probably just outside the top 3 for me, but I'm including him as a support since he sees more top level play there rather than solo. Speaking of, let's get into those supports, and I may as well talk about Hercules first since we're on topic. The support role is definitely the role that's seen the least change with the new patch. Aside from Sledge making its way into most physical support builds, not that much has changed for our tanky duo lane brethren. Hercules was one of the better supports, especially in the SPL, but even for ranked and casuals before the patch, and afterwards he's still top 3 in my opinion. He's very aggressive and high kill potential, so you can often look to snag early leads or even kills in duo lane before you start rotating, and of course he makes great use of Sledge before or after your Thebes. The Earthbreaker Driving Strike combo is a death sentence even to frontliners in this meta with all the magical ADCs and auto-attack junglers going around and the easy access to 40% pen on most classes. Frontliners have to be very careful against the Hercules since most don't buy beads and one pull can mean your death. Herc can dive pretty effectively, but his CC is mostly single target, so he's actually more effective at peeling his own backline than diving the enemy, which is partly why he sees more success in support than solo. You can rock a Cthulhu, Amaterasu, Wukong etc. from solo as a backline diver and keep Hercules on peel duty, which is very effective. I'm sure some of you will be surprised to see Herc here as a support, but if you haven't tried it yet, I highly recommend you do. It's very fun and damn strong as well. Yamoja is my second pick for support, which probably surprises no one. She's been a top support since her release, and while she plays very differently and has a unique skill set, if you're good with her, she's in contention for the best support in the entire game. My advice with Yamoja though is don't pick her because she's top tier, pick her because you're good at her and she's top tier. A bad Yamoja player can make her look trash, but she's definitely one of the strongest gods in the entire game when piloted by a competent player who knows the god. Her lack of cooldowns makes her early laning phase in duo lane extremely dominant, and she can use her resources freely in teamfights without the limitation of cooldowns to peel for her carries extremely effectively. Plus the ult is very disruptive and can easily cut a team in half if you're fighting in the jungle over an objective and just win the fight because of that. Yamoja is definitely a top 3 support right now. And the final pick was contested in my opinion between Jing Chen and Khepri, but I have to give this one to Jing. Khepri is still very strong right now and is valued highly by the community, so if you want to go off that, definitely give him a try. Jing was in my last video as a wildcard support that I thought would be very good, and it turns out he's very strong. Jing is flexible and can play a dive playstyle as well as a more peel focused one. He's great at burning beads or ultimates by using his own ult, which allows your team to follow up, and if the enemy has already used their beads and or CC immune ults, or they just don't have them in the first place, he pretty much gets a free kill from landing his ult. But keep that in mind, you don't always have to get pulls with his ult, it's still valuable just as a beads and ult burner. His 1 is also massively important and overlooked in this meta. Being able to reduce the auto attack damage of enemies by 50% in this meta is so huge. With the likes of Nemesis, Arachne and Baka in jungle, Freya, Olorun and Sol in ADC, and of course there's still normal hunters like Ula and Heim running around, half the enemy team's damage seems to come from basic attacking in this meta, and being able to debuff the enemy auto attackers by 50% of their damage for 4 seconds is life-saving, and is a huge reason why Jing is a top pick right now in my eyes. And last but not least, we have mid laners. This role has also not changed that much since the patch outside of the addition of Olorun being a good mid laner, along with some hunters bleeding into the role so that you can fit a magical ADC in duo lane. First up, we have Persephone. Yeah, she's still insanely strong. Her ultimate finds a little bit less value in this meta with all the auto attackers running around, but it's still ridiculously strong and can hit from halfway across the map. Her 1 is great for poking in lane and before teamfights or around objectives, and her plants can control the lane and force enemies on the tower, which allows her to out-farm them and pressure for rotations to other lanes and teamfights. She can be a bit unsafe as her jump doesn't go that far, but once you take into account that she can stand further back than any other mid laner just by virtue of her insane range, means she doesn't need an amazing jump to still be safe in teamfights. Similar to Yamoja, I don't recommend Persephone if you're inexperienced with her, but if you know her pretty well, she's definitely a top tier mid laner that can do things no other mid does. Hebo, however, is a new face in the mid-season patch. Being able to burst people down in a meta focused on sustained damage from magical ADCs and auto-attack junglers is very valuable, and Hebo is the king of bursting people down. He also does really well into the top meta picks right now. He pretty much hard counters Baka and does well into Nemesis too. Being able to immune their slows, and in the case of Baka, 3 him into the air and ult before he gets full value from Regurgitate, and in the case of Nem, cancel her shield with the 3 and burst her down. Slow immunity in his base kit is a very valuable tool in a meta filled with Nem, Baka and Cthulhu diving the backline. Hebo can often survive longer than he has any business doing because of his counters to these specific gods that are strong right now. And before we talk about our final mid laner, I'll mention that I think Hebo is also a pretty strong jungler as well right now for similar reasons, but I do think other jungle picks are stronger. And the final mid laner and final god for the video is Aphrodite. This one is loose, and honestly I could see Aphro falling off further in the coming weeks and someone else replacing her top 3 spot, possibly Merlin, who's my honourable mention pick here. But for right now, Aphrodite still seems like a very strong mid laner who of course brings that healing, which is still good despite the meta being very anti-heal focused due to magical ADCs building heavy lifesteal. She still combos pretty well with the chop junglers, and Aphro linked to a Nemesis can decimate a backline very easily, and if you know how to make effective use of Aphro's kit, I still recommend her as a top mid laner right now. But that's my thoughts on the top 3 gods for every role in patch 7.8, plus a few honourable mentions as well. Any of these picks will serve you well if you're looking to grind ranked or are just tired of losing casuals and want to play some OP stuff for easy wins. If you agree or disagree, then let me know down below with reasons why, and I'll catch you guys in another one later on. Have a great day, and peace out, you nerds.